So I take it that Bhagwati has provided a boil down of the benefits that people in countries like Armenia should have been expected to enjoy somewhere along the line once they embraced economic globalization. And I take it that, well, I don't take it this way, but I'm, let's say, charitably assuming that the most thoughtful people who were pushing Armenia towards re-embracing capitalism. Let's not forget that Armenia we had already had our experience with capitalism in the early part of the 20th century. We had our experience with the rising national bourgeoisie in Turkey. Our experience with capitalism, our first ended in genocide at the beginning part of the 20th century. Now I find this interesting because Gary Kasparov, I don't know if you guys heard about this, yeah. So on April 28th, he spoke to a group. This was a genocide commemoration group. And he said, the KGB organized the Armenian genocide. This is the former world chess champion, Gary, he's a chess champion. So, okay, now here's the thing with this chess champion. Arithmetic. Okay, so KGB was founded in 1954. Okay, so, okay, now it's easy to laugh at Kasparov when he says this stuff. But, you know, it's not the most laughable claim that's been made by these guys, the Kasparov guy. Kasparov, what we can take as a sort of an embodiment of the pro-free market guy, right? I mean, he had this, he was a regular writer for the Wall Street Journal and so forth. A darling of the so-called liberals, right? One of the good things I'm seeing this evening, or today rather, is that we're calling the conservatives, well, we're calling the neocons and the neoliberals, we're calling them conservatives now. If you recall 20 years ago, these people were called revolutionaries, right? So they were called liberals. Yet Boris Yeltsin and his administration were called liberals. So we've made a little bit of rhetorical progress here. Okay, so wittingly or not, then Armenians embraced economic globalization, and I hope we have an idea what we mean by economic globalization. They embraced it 20 years ago. So let's take a peek at Bhagwati's benefits of globalization one by one and ask ourselves if Armenians have benefited from them. Now, for some of you, all I had to do was roll out that list of benefits, and you already know what the story is here. I mean, it's almost like that list of supposed benefits of globalization with reference to Armenia is already an indictment. Just reading off that list, you already know that it's like laughable. At least with reference to Armenia, you know it's laughable. So over the years, many of us in this room have sorted through the headlines of scholarly papers on topics of poverty reduction in Armenia. We've read about economic performance. We've also read about women's rights, labor standards, environmental degradation in Armenia. And because of time constraints, I'm not going to go into that. I'm also going to, as I said, try not to repeat a lot of stuff. I just repeated that. But I'll restrict myself to just a few scattered remarks, just enough, hopefully, to get the point across. Let's take poverty reduction first. Okay, poverty reduction. Okay, so in the first 10 years after returning to the capitalist fold, it was a return to the capitalist fold. What took place in Armenia in the early 1990s was not a revolution, it was a counter-revolution. It was a turn back to capitalism, which Armenia had already had a very bad experience with. Okay, so after returning to the capitalist fold, Armenia registered a net loss of hundreds of thousands of its population. And despite the influx of Armenians, thousands, tens of thousands of Armenians, maybe hundreds of thousands, from Azerbaijan and Georgia and other parts of the Transcaucasus. So that in all, perhaps 1 million citizens of Armenia emigrated during the first 10 years of the post-Soviet era. Now, in the years since then, this trend has not reversed itself. On the contrary, immigration continues apace today. Moreover, life expectancies and marriage and birth rates have plummeted far below what they were in the last decades of the Soviet period. This is extensively documented, and I've written on this elsewhere. One could go on, but these facts alone, these demographic facts alone, stand as a damning indictment of capitalism in Armenia. Now, I remember 30 years ago, the usual right-wing people in this town here, Los Angeles, would point to the thousands of Armenians immigrants, Armenians who left Armenia during the Soviet period over the years, and there were thousands in East Hollywood and so on. And they would say, you see them, socialism has failed. They voted with their feet against socialism. They voted with their feet against socialism. Of course, the population of Armenia continued to grow, but there were thousands, tens of thousands over the years of Armenians who left Soviet Armenia, who abandoned Soviet Armenia. Okay, so socialism had failed. So what then, I wonder, do these million immigrants, that's 2 million feet, voting against, what are they voting against? Exactly. In the years since Armenia's independence, we have seen it's not a catastrophe exactly, but it's a disaster, a demographic disaster has taken place in Armenia that needs to be registered. And it's not just Armenia, it's the Transcaucasus as a whole. There is perhaps 67%, there is perhaps 1/3 fewer Armenians in the Transcaucasus as a whole today than there were 20 years ago. I mean, this is a disaster. Maybe not a catastrophe, but it is a disaster. So as it stands now, Armenia is set to privatize the pension plans. They're set to do that. Let's see if they can actually get away with it. So the leaders of Armenia are set to privatize their Social Security in January 2010. Is that still the date? January 2010?
Yeah, it's not part of the parliament. They're postponing.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. Maybe with a little more pressure, they could continue to postpone. But the very notion, the very idea that it would be seriously accepted, the notion of privatizing the pension plan in Armenia shows something. Workers in Armenia will see part of their pay go into private pension if this happens. We're hoping it's not going to happen. You can keep postponing it until the day that they're overthrown. Okay, so they will see part of their pay go into private pension plans to fund the domestic capital markets. And they've been pretty explicit about this. So you're going to take the pension book. Now, I've spoken to economists about this in Armenia, and they say, well, it doesn't matter. It's like squeezing the blood out of a turnip. There's not any money there anyway in the pension plans. Which is interesting to me, because the next question is, well, why then are they going to try to do this? You know, it seems to me that they have such overweening confidence in their domination of the society that for maybe tiny considerations of profit for them, they don't think they're running the risk of creating social instability in Armenia by stealing one of the last resources that they can steal from Armenia after selling the industrial infrastructure scrap metal to Iran. So this is just open class war by the plutocrats in Armenia. This is open class war by them and their paid lieutenants in the ministries. This open class war against an unorganized, demoralized, befuddled, impotent, and defeated working class. See, I can say there's no such thing as class struggle. I can say that here in the United States. I can say that in Armenia. I can say that in Argentina. Okay, so there's no such thing as class. Is there no struggle just because I lay down on the ground and let some guy stand on my neck and kick me in the head, and you just keep kicking me in the head? There's no struggle. Well, in a way, there is no struggle, so I'm not fighting back. I'm just laying down and kicking. But there is some kind of class conflict going on here.
Class aggression.
So that seems to be the story. Just because the working class ceases to struggle, that doesn't mean that class conflict has disappeared. It's like slavery. Okay, so